Chapter 14, Fitness, Physical Activity, Nutrients, and Body Adaptations. These are your learning objectives. Fitness, the state of being fit or characteristics that enable the body to perform physical activity. Depends on physical activity and exercise. We'll use exercise and physical activity interchangeably. Typically, exercise is considered to be more structured, like going to the gym specifically to work out versus the activity that you would get if you were walking through the mall for a couple of hours, let's say. Sedentary just means physically inactive. Physical inactivity is linked with many diseases: heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, and hypertension. These are the characteristics or components of physical fitness. Flexibility allows joints to move freely, reducing risk of injury. Cardiorespiratory endurance supports activity of the heart and lungs. Muscle strength and endurance enable muscles to work without fatigue, and body composition is optimized. Lean body tissue is increased, body fat is decreased. Some benefits of fitness. These include restful sleep, nutritional health. Exercise burns calories, leaving room for people to eat more. If foods are chosen wisely, active people will consume more nutrients and be less likely to develop a deficiency. Improved body composition, less fat and more lean tissue. Improved bone density. Weight-bearing activity builds bone strength and protects against osteoporosis. It can even boost your immune system, leading to resistance to colds and other infectious diseases. It lowers your risk of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. Promotes self-confidence, building a strong self-image. Long life with improved quality of life, and a lower incidence or severity of depression and anxiety. ACSM Guidelines for Physical Fitness. ACSM stands for the American College of Sports Medicine. These are the guidelines for physical activity, duration, and examples are on the next slide. Cardiorespiratory. So cardio, it improves cardiovascular endurance and uses large muscle groups. Strength, builds muscle and improves body composition. Flexibility, stretching and improving range of motion can help prevent injury. This is a continuation of the last slide and includes examples of such activities. Cardiorespiratory conditioning. Aerobic workouts using large muscle groups that improve heart and lung function. Heart and lungs' ability to deliver oxygen and remove waste improves. Exercise examples include running and swimming. Benefits from conditioning include increases cardiac output and oxygen delivery, increases blood volume per heartbeat, increases breathing efficiency, stronger lungs, improves circulation, reduces blood pressure, slows resting pulse. Resistance training. Resistance training uses free weights or machines to provide resistance to help improve body strength. Body weight exercises include things like push-ups, pull-ups, and crunches. The purpose or benefits: to build muscle mass, develop and maintain muscle strength, muscle power, and muscle endurance. Maximize and maintain bone mass, improve posture and reduce risk of back injury, can improve bone density for postmenopausal women, and improves physical mobility in older adults. Cardiorespiratory endurance. I'm going to ask that you pause the presentation momentarily and see if you could match these together. Now we'll talk about energy systems. Remember ATP from Chapter 7 and how it provides energy for all cells? ATP, a high energy compound that delivers energy instantly, small amounts in all body tissues at all times, provides force for muscle contraction, provides the energy to power activities of cells. So ATP is in all cells. We have three systems to regenerate ATP as it's being used. Those are the phosphagen system, also known as creatine phosphate system, the lactic acid system, or the anaerobic glycolysis, and the aerobic system, so aerobic glycolysis, fatty acid oxidation, and the TCA cycle. So all three systems are in effect at any given time, but usually one system is predominant depending on the intensity of the activity and conditioning of the person. The first system is the phosphagen system or creatine phosphate system. Creatine phosphate splits anaerobically to release phosphate, which replenishes ATP. This is for activities that take less than 10 seconds, and it produces quick energy without oxygen. So this energy system happens immediately at the onset of demand, or when you try to do something. For example, like swinging a baseball bat. The muscles break off a phosphate group from creatine phosphate to put it back on ATP. Remember that reaction of ATP going to ADP and ADP going back to ATP. So adenosine triphosphate, tri being 3, and adenosine diphosphate, di being 2. Main points, it's the first system without oxygen and duration of less than 10 seconds. The lactic acid system. Anaerobic breakdown of glucose to pyruvate and then pyruvate to lactate. Primary source of glucose is glycogen. Remember, glycogen is the stored form of glucose in liver and muscles. Generates ATP for up to 3 minutes, so longer than 10 seconds, but not an extended period of time. Main points, it's another anaerobic reaction, so anaerobic meaning without oxygen. It's a reaction to generate ATP for a short amount of time. Lastly, you have the aerobic system. Carbohydrate, fat, and some amino acids are continuously oxidized to supply ATP. It requires oxygen, and it meets the prolonged demands of sustained activity. Activities of high intensity from 2 to 20 minutes, things like cycling, swimming, or running, and activities of moderate intensity for longer than 20 minutes, such as hiking. This system requires oxygen and has a longer duration. There is some overlap, that 2 to 3 minute mark, with the lactic acid system. The greater the intensity of activity, the more likely it is to require the aerobic energy system. I'm going to ask that you pause the presentation momentarily and see if you can match these accordingly. Each one on the left-hand side matches with 2 on the right. Glucose use during physical activity. Glycogen, storage form of glucose in liver and muscles. Liver breaks down its glycogen to release glucose into the bloodstream. Muscles use this glucose as well as their own glycogen stores. Increased glycogen stores leads to increased endurance. This occurs when glycogen stores are full. Carbohydrate intake influences glycogen storage. Glycogen stores about 2,000 calories, so you're getting about 2,000 calories worth of energy, enough for about 20 miles of running. Intensity and duration of activity influence glycogen use as well as training. Moderate activity like jogging uses glycogen more slowly than a quarter-mile race. Well-trained muscles store more glycogen, and glycogen breaks down more slowly compared to an untrained muscle. Glycogen. Maintain glycogen stores at a maximum. You want to consume a high carbohydrate diet, about 8 grams per kilogram or 70% of total energy intake. May need glucose during activities greater than 1 hour. Eat approximately 60 grams of high carbohydrate foods after activity. A high carbohydrate meal within 2 hours after activity accelerates glycogen storage, and consistent training is also important. Fat use during physical activity. Fat intake recommendations for athletes is the same as the general population, about 20 to 35% of energy from fat, less than 10% from saturated fat. Fat can fuel hours of activity, so fat can store up to 70,000 calories as compared to the 2,000 calories of glycogen. Spot reducing simply doesn't work. Muscles don't own the fat that's around them. For example, tennis players have similar fat on their arms despite only swinging one arm to play the game. Factors affecting fat use. It's similar to glycogen use. Duration and intensity of activity and training will influence it. Athletes' protein needs. Protein is not a major fuel for activity. About 10% of total fuel used during activity and rest. It provides some, but is not a major source. Its primary role is to build muscle and other tissue. Diet. Adequate carbohydrate intake spares protein use as fuel. Greater reliance on protein once glycogen stores are depleted. Synthesis of body proteins accelerate after activity. Protein starts to build muscle after activity, not during. Synthesis is suppressed during activity. Approximately 30 to 35 grams of protein recommended to assist with muscle synthesis after activity. Recommended protein intakes for athletes. You can see that the male recommendations are slightly higher than for females, and protein recommendations are higher for athletes. Protein use during physical activity and between times. I asked to pause for a moment to see if you can answer the first two questions. Vitamins and minerals. Nutrient supplements do not enhance the performance of well-nourished people. Deficiencies, however, do impede performance. So similar to what we talked about before, more does not equal better, and deficiency can be harmful. Nutrients of concern. Iron deficiency. Role in delivering oxygen to cells. High demand of muscle protein. Endurance athletes, distance running. Result, easily fatigued, shortness of breath. So muscle cells require oxygen, and oxygen requirements go up for intense, long duration activities. If you are suffering from iron deficiency, you won't be able to effectively deliver the oxygen to the body. Females and vegetarians are at a greater risk. This is because of their loss of iron through menstruation and the lower bioavailability of iron in plant foods. Another nutrient of concern, calcium, has a very important role in bone density. Supplement for amenorrheic females. Decreased estrogen production leads to increased bone mineral loss. And then they're at an increased susceptibility to stress fractures and bone breaks. Hydration. We'll talk about hydration and why it's so important for athletes. Fluids are lost through sweat and breathing. The first sign of dehydration is fatigue. You want to hydrate before activity. Rehydrate during and after activity. Plain, cool water is recommended for everyday active people. Carbohydrate-containing beverages are recommended for endurance athletes. Water loss greater than 2% of body weight reduces capacity for muscular work. Greater than 7% loss, collapse may occur. I ask that you pause the presentation for a moment to see if you can answer the questions. This slide compares symptoms of heat stroke and hypothermia. The first few symptoms you can see are similar. Point being here that fluid intake is so important to prevent things like heat stroke, but also even slight dehydration leads to fatigue and decreased performance. Sports drinks. Hydration is critical for optimal performance. Sports drinks offer fluid to provide hydration, glucose provides energy for working muscles, sodium and other electrolytes help replete what is lost in sweat, and they have a good taste. It may be beneficial for exercise lasting longer than 1 hour, and it's only needed for activities greater than 1 hour long. Otherwise, water works just fine. You do want to note, though, that sports drinks are a source of extra calories and may be counterproductive if trying to lose weight. And that concludes Chapter 14.